This is my 109th video on my work with OO gauge. See part 1 of this series for my reasons for getting into OO gauge when I already had a lot invested in working in N gauge and I didn't really have space available for a large, fully operational OO gauge layout. Also see my lengthy series on my N gauge railway modelling for smaller and more complex scenery and smaller scale trains running. This part is an introductory review of a loco purchase, the Rails of Sheffield exclusive Locomotion Models Bachmann L&NWR Improved Precedent class. I hesitated about buying this model for a couple of reasons. It was listed at a very high price, £220 for the most basic version, more of course if DCC fitted, but I didn't want that. And also this model only fitted rather loosely into my prototype, which is LMS operations in the 1930s. This class of locos was developed in the 1880s, and they were most significant during the races to the north in the 1890s, at which time they were the premier passenger express locos of the London and North Western Railway. 76 of them were inherited by the LMS upon amalgamation in 1923, but by this time they were essentially close to obsolete and certainly not premier express locos. The last of them was withdrawn by the LMS in 1934, so not really a class of loco that was very significant for LMS operations in my period. On the other hand, a version of this model was offered in LMS crimson livery, and it certainly appeared to be very handsome. I didn't pre-order the model from Rails of Sheffield, the only source for purchase, as this was an exclusive issue. But when the LMS version was still available for purchase after the model actually came out, I weakened and went ahead and ordered it. And it actually arrived a little while ago, but I've been so occupied with working on the end-to-end shelf layout that I was building that I didn't get around to unboxing it until now. Here's the box as it arrived, a little unusual, as though the manufacturing of this model was handled by Bachmann, Rails of Sheffield and Locomotion Models were both involved in the design process, and the model was sold on an exclusive basis. Here's the back of the box with some details about the history of this class, the most famous of which is Hardwick, which is preserved. Here's the end of the box showing the version that I bought, novelty as it might have been run in the early days of the LMS. Once the sleeve was removed, the interior packaging was more conventional, with the loco in the standard plastic block of ice. Taking the block of ice out, there were 2 detail packs inside the top of it. One contained a set of etched nameplates for novelty, a nice premium touch. The other detail pack contained a set of driving wheels without traction tyres, which could be optionally used to replace the wheels with traction tyres that came mounted on the loco. In addition to the alternative wheels, this bag contained screw-link couplings and vacuum pipes for the buffer bars, and another quite large item that I couldn't at first identify. Here's the model still in its block of ice, but with the covering removed, a very nice finish, a sort of satin gloss that seems quite appropriate. Reviewing the documentation that came in the box, I realized that the large item in the detail bag was a water scoop that could be mounted under the tender. This would have been to allow replenishment of the water in the tender from water troughs between the rails whilst the train was in motion. I wouldn't be too inclined to mount this on the model, as it would hardly be seen and it might cause running problems with raised items between the rails. These instructions also noted that the screw-link couplings and steam pipes could only be mounted if the regular NEM couplings were removed. Not a trade-off that I'd want to make, I don't think, certainly not at the back. Straight away now we come to my biggest gripe about this model. I will keep going on about this, and I'm sorry, but it really irritates me. The loco and tender are coupled together using the system that Bachmann have been employing for some time now, whereby a plastic pin protruding down at the front of the tender must be inserted into a hole at the back of the drawbar from the loco. To be blunt, this is a terrible design, and continuing to use it is absolutely moronic. It's difficult to get the pin into the hole in the drawbar, and even more difficult to keep it engaged whilst railing the loco. There's nothing at all holding the pin engaged with the drawbar, and it will always become disengaged whenever the loco and tender are handled normally. And if the loco is run with the pin disengaged, all that will be connecting the loco and tender will be the wires. So unless you are very, very careful and persistent, you'll end up pulling the tender and whatever train you have coupled behind it by nothing but the loco to tender wires. So eventually, unless you exercise great care and persistence to avoid this, you will probably damage those wires. Many, many people have told Bachmann over and over again that this is a stupid design and they should stop using it, and yet they persist. Why, oh why, in the name of sanity? Surely it wouldn't involve any really significant cost to them to retain the drawbar attachment to the tender using a screw or something similar. Other than that, the model was a delight upon initial examination. The finish is lovely, the cab is nicely detailed. The detail around the front of the tender is also very convincing. Even without mounting the etched nameplates, the loco is very handsome, and a significant effort has been made to model the valve gear for the internal cylinders under the boiler. The tender is generally very nicely made. The buffers are not actually sprung, but they look very believable, and convincing modelling is really more important than springing. You can see the L&NWR builder's plate on the back of the tender. The rails round the tender are quite nice, although perhaps a little too thick for accuracy. The cab windows look very good from the front. Overall, I was entirely happy with the detailing of this model, and I haven't noticed any assembly problems with mine. No glue marks, no wonky parts, no errors in the paintwork. So let's just see the Precedent on the rolling road. Of course, it's got no valve gear, it's inside cylinders, although they have modelled the valve gear a bit, I see. There is actually some modelled valve gear in there, but of course it's not real valve gear. So you're not going to see moving valve gear as I power it up on the rolling road. Oops, famous last words, and there you go. But you can see the wheels running at least, just the two pairs of driving wheels. The tender's not sitting perfectly level on the back, but that's just because my DCC rollers are a little too high for the track I'm putting them on. I'm not going to power it up very fast, because I haven't run it in yet. We'll run it in. Now I'm told this is a ridiculously highly geared engine. That's a known problem with this, unfortunately, that they geared it way too high. Which I can well see, because that's like 10% power or something. Mind you, this is on an old Bachmann controller that's a bit heavy, but still. That's only about 10% power, and that to me should be more like 50% power for this loco. We'll see how it runs on the actual layout for running in. That's going backwards, of course. I'll try and turn it round to go forwards again. Seems very smooth. Seems to start up very smoothly. There's none of the problems changing direction you sometimes have with a brand new loco and whatever. And as I say, I'm only giving it a tiny amount of power because it doesn't seem to need it. It's a coreless motor, and it's unfortunately overly fastly geared, overly fast motor. So we'll see. I don't think I'm going to run this in at 50%, because at 50% I think it'll be running at a ridiculous sort of express speed. So we'll have to see what seems like a reasonable running in speed for it. Having checked out the model on the bench and on the rolling road, I got it onto my Hornby layout for running in. It looked very handsome on the rails. However, getting loco and tender railed properly whilst keeping them correctly joined together using that stupid drawbar connection was a real problem. Okay, well, so here the Precedent is on the outside line of my Hornby layout, ready for running in. And I think I've got it railed properly. Getting it hooked up properly with a tender with that really stupid Bachmann connection is tricky. you think you've got it connected properly, but you don't half the time. That plastic pin just does not go into the drawbar and stay in the drawbar very well. And of course, if you don't have the plastic pin in, then you're towing the tender and the train, when you've got a train on the back, by nothing but the wires, which is not good. Okay, oh, I guess I'd better zoom out because he's going to move off now. And we'll try and start him off at a nice slow speed. What we're giving, 20%? Yeah, that's 20%. Well, you've got to give him, he's a very nice, smooth, quiet runner. Good Lord, oh well, because he's now stopped. Oh, well, that's not such a good, but dirty part on the track, I imagine. What shall we do? Put the power up, to 40%. I think I'm going to have to resort to a poking stick. I'm not greatly blaming him, although, mind you, I'm a bit surprised, because I thought I had other loco, I was just running locos around this track before, and I thought they ran fine. So I'm a bit surprised that he's getting... Well, I don't know. Oh dear. You do not know what the problem is here. Oh, it seems like his tender's got derailed. Now that's 40% power. Yeah, his tender was derailed. Again, probably a problem with that confounded tender hookup. I probably didn't have that. Probably still don't. I suppose I should stop him and check it. It's that confounded tender hookup. I think it's on right now. It's just so hard to tell because it's such a stupid hookup. You've got to get that plastic pin in the little hole. And I'm going to turn the camera off and check it, I guess. Honestly, this is the big flaw with this loco. It's a beautiful loco, except it's a devil to get that pin on the plastic pin on the loco to hook into the hole in the drawbar from the pin on the tender to hook into the drawbar from the loco and stay in. It's really difficult. It doesn't stay in readily at all because it's a fairly short plastic pin and you've got to get it into the drawbar and then get the thing railed properly, and it's just very hard to do. I think I've got it done now. I'm using the handheld controller to drive the engine now. We'll see if we get round this time. I think that was the problem the first time, was that it wasn't the track at all that was causing the problem. The tender derailed because I hadn't got it hooked up to the loco properly. Such a stupid design flaw in such a nice loco. What speed are we at? Just over 30%, that is. Now that to me, and that's on the Morley, that to me should be more like 50%, that speed. This was not a fast loco. Okay, that's 40. I don't think I'm going to put it up to more than 40 for running in, frankly, because that just seems fast enough. So we'll let it do its running in like that forwards, and then we'll run it in for 40 for half an hour backwards at the same sort of speed, and hope that everything works properly. Of course, backwards is going to be a different problem with that tender hooked up. Well, I think I've got it hooked up right now, but it's so hard to tell. It's very hard to get it hooked up, and when the loco and tender are on the track, it's hard to tell if that pin is really in the drawbar. Dumb design, and so many people have told Bachmann this for ages. Why do they still keep doing it anyway? Other than that, it's a very nice loco so far, and it does run, I've got to give it, extremely smoothly, because I've been running some old Wren and Hornby double locos recently, which should expect to run rather more roughly than this, but Still, it does seem to be a very nice, smooth, quiet runner, so we'll let it run in and see how that works out. The running in went basically okay, except that during the running in a distinct and annoying squeak developed, and I haven't so far been able to track down what is causing this and to eliminate it. The running of the loco doesn't seem to have slowed down, so hopefully the squeak doesn't represent any problem that is too critical, but I will have to investigate it further. Anyway, for now, I coupled the loco up to 3 ex-Midland clerestory coaches so we could see it running with a train. I went with clerestory coaches as though they originate from a different pre-grouping company to the loco. They seemed somehow more appropriate with a loco that was already quite venerable at the time of amalgamation. The gearing of this model is unfortunately ridiculously high. It goes much too fast, so something like 45% power will give a speed that would be the absolute maximum that would be realistic for the prototype. So let's finish for now by seeing that train running. So I've run the precedent in now for just over half an hour forwards and backwards. It seems to have developed a slight squeak that I can't quite pin down where it's coming from, which is not good, of course. Otherwise, it still seems to be running okay. It runs extremely fast for the amount of power you give it. It's geared rather ridiculously. I've got it hooked up to 3 clerestory coaches. They're a bit of a mixture. That's a Hornby. Then the middle one there is one I built from a ratio kit, and the back one's another Hornby. So, well, let's see if we can run him with this little train of clerestory coaches. I went with the clerestory coaches because the precedent, you know, was already kind of an obsolete engine. Something falling down there, but we'll ignore it for now, I think. It's nothing too important, it's just some foliage or trees. Okay, so let's see if we can run him. I've got the handheld in my other hand. There we go. 30% power. We'll go up to about 35, 40 maybe. It's a tricky engine to rail this because that linkage between the engine and the tender is terrible, and trying to keep that joined so the pin on the tender is actually going through the hole in the drawbar whilst getting the engine and tender railed properly is very tricky. And I found it essentially pretty impossible to rail the train manually. I had to use a railer, like one of those ramps and whatever. And I had to carefully attach the tender to the engine, make sure that I'm pulling the engine up relative to the tender, basically to keep the drawbar pinned into the tender, put the engine onto the railer and then run it backwards. I think I need to clean my track again. I clean my track a lot, but it looks like I need to clean it again back in the station there. We're getting a little bit of a hesitation in the station, aren't we there? Yes. Doesn't stop, but it slows down. It's a beautiful engine for sure, and generally it runs well, but I'm going to have to, I don't know quite what to do. I'm going to have to investigate, see if I can figure out where that squeak's coming from. You hear that squeak? There's a distinct squeak, and that sort of developed during running in. It wasn't doing it when I first started, but by the end of running in, it was doing that. And it just seems to keep doing it now. I guess something needs oiling, but I don't quite know what, and I don't want to put a lot of oil in unnecessary places. Let's just pull him up for now then, and we'll see. So a beautiful engine for sure, but a couple of issues. Lovely detail, I'm not complaining at all about the detail, but it has developed a bit of a squeak, and that junk join between the engine and the tender is a real pain.